Okay, welcome. This is episode 49 of the Freedom Hustles podcast with me, John Banks, and Andy Lehman from the Freedom Skills Academy. So how you doing, Andy? You all right?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. Thank you very much. Yourself?
Yes, very good. Yeah, pretty productive week. Yeah, all in all, it's been good. So anyway, yeah, so what are we on? What episode 49? Right. So what are we talking about this evening?
Well, basically, it's the art of decision making. This is something that I've often thought about, and it's something that people don't generally get taught. People don't think about it. There's an old saying that I often believe or like to sort of quote, and that is, people don't know what they don't know. And when it comes to sort of decision making, lots of people kind of have only sort of taught one way of looking at things. Sort of a prime example would be people generally make a decision to not do something in order to save money, when in fact by doing so could actually be a false economy and cost them more money in the long run. And it's because we're in a society where a majority of people we've been led to believe that it's best to sort of save money. I mean, a prime example would be our grandparents' generation, the war generation, when people didn't have a lot of money, and you couldn't really spend much money, you couldn't be frivolous, and so if you could do it, the make do men generation, if they could do it, they would. So like decorating your own home, people, they taught themselves to hang wallpaper, they would paint, because basically you come home from work, you can pick up a couple of paint brushes and you can do it yourself. So you could save money by doing it that way. But that's great that people are taught that, and that's been passed down by generation. But sometimes it's a false economy, especially because if you decide that you come home, it depends on what your work is, but you could technically paint your living room. It takes you all weekend. You may hate doing it, and you might look there and finish and think by the Sunday night you saved yourself, say, 500 quid. But the chances are, if you're like a copywriter, if you're a writer, if you work overtime or you do something else, you could actually probably get your room decorated quicker having a professional in, pay them to do it, and actually still have money in your pocket.
Yeah.
So the thing with the decision making is that there's always two sides to a decision, and most people don't know necessarily which is the right way. They have this idea that might be the right decision, but it isn't always. I mean, I always remember, I've told you this story before, when I was doing up a house many years ago, when I was a lot younger, I took out the old copper water tank and I swapping it for one of these new combi boilers, so it was water as soon as you turn the tap on. We took out the old immersion heater and the old copper tank, and people say, "Oh, copper tanks, they're worth something. You want to hold on to that." And for those who don't know, I used to be a joiner. I'm a qualified joiner, wood butcher, and so I saved this tank ready to take down to the scrappy. But while I was doing the house up, it was always in the way. So it was in this corner here, and I wanted to be there, so I'd shift it over here, and I'd shift it over there. And like for weeks on end, I was forever shifting this copper tank around, because I made this decision that I wasn't going to stick it in the skip. I was going to take it to the scrappy and get some money off it. When I finally went round to the scrappy, and he said, "Yeah, that's fine. I'll give you 5 quid." And so basically I got 5 quid for this copper tank. And I sat there and I calculated the amount of time I'd spent moving it from pillar to post for that last month or so while it was in the house. If I just stuck it in the skip and then I'd just gone and spent a Saturday morning hanging a door, I would have been far more quids in, and I'd have had less work to do.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So you're working on this kind of information. You make a decision a lot of the time based on certain sort of factors at variance that and you often miss the other side. And sometimes a decision making is not what you do is not necessarily the best decision.
Yeah.
So it's the art of decision making. That's kind of what today's podcast is about.
So flipping that mainly into the kind of online world, then obviously you've given a few practical, real world examples there. But we're kind of focusing on, the sort of online world, and, if you're going to, starting up with some of the stuff that we've talked about, whether it be, freelancing or writing a book or, building websites or, side hustles of any kind, really, as long as there's a sort of online element to it. So I guess what we're talking about as well a lot of people are scared, aren't they, to sort of invest. I don't want to say scared. Scared is not the right word, but they do have this kind of this little bit of fear, perhaps, in investing and maybe spending money on projects. And I totally get that, because when you're starting out, you obviously every penny counts and this, that, and the other. But it is very, very hard to kind of get off the ground and get going. You can get so far, can't you? Like doing it all yourself, but then it gets to a point where you do have to part with some money, whether that be running some ads. And I know the first time you're going to do that, it's probably going to fail. Whether that be, spending some money on, some freelance writers. Again, you might not find the perfect fit the first time, the second time, the third time, but eventually you will. So every time you do spend money, even though it might feel a bit, I can't really afford to waste it. I see it as even the money that you spend, which you would consider is wasted, or perhaps you don't get results from, that's not actually wasted. That's actually money that you've spent and you've learned from. So, for example, in the ad example, we've spent loads of, thousands of dollars on ads over the years, and no way did they all work. Loads of them, probably more than half of them, I'd say, don't work, do they? But from that, you learn, and then you can then eliminate that from sort of like the next time you run it. So you build up this experience. So when you do part with, your hard-earned cash on projects, it might feel like, I can't really do that, or perhaps I shouldn't really do that. And in what if it's a flop? You've probably got this fear of thinking, what if the whole thing is a complete waste of money? Well, I would try and flip that around and try and turn that perhaps negative experience into a positive one by saying that you've actually learned something. You can learn something from everything, even if stuff doesn't work.
It's not just that as well. I mean, the decision-making process, like you say, you decide to sort of spend money, but you haven't got the money to spend. So a lot of people, I ain't got the money to spend. I can't do this, or I can't do that. But like you say, the decision, or what I want people to sort of think about, is that as you sit there making that decision, I can't afford to spend this 20 quid on ads. And unless you really, really can't, then often you have to do stuff yourself. But sometimes you might not have the £20, but by doing it yourself or not doing something, you can actually prolong the problem. So where you're saying there, let's say you're running ads and they don't work, you spent £500 on ads, you think you've lost that money. But the chances are, if you hadn't taken that step, which let's say in that month or 2 months, you spend that money and it's failed. And I use the word failed as in it's not worked as you'd hoped, but it has 2 months gone. Whereas if you hadn't spent that £500 and you put it off because you made this decision that you can't afford to spend it, 12 months down the line, 24 months down the line, you could still be in the same position. And you've saved yourself £500, but you've not got anywhere. Whereas by spending that £500, you've wasted it, you've lost it, you feel a bit pained, you feel a bit whatever. But 4 months down the line, you probably actually pushed on, and you've learned what went wrong, you've done this and the other, and then you're starting to get some money back. Whereas if you hadn't made that move in the first place, you could have been, like I said, a year, 2 years down the line and still not actually got off the starting block. The thing about deciding, or thing about decisions is, you said about doing this on the online world. This is, depending on who's listening to the podcast, what circumstances, what their situation is. But decision making can be a combination of both online and offline, because I've used this example before. And in fact, I'm going to use something that you've done in the past as an example. You were hired to make a website for a driving instructor, a car bloke.
Yeah.
And he paid you to make that website because he didn't know how to do it. Now, he could have made the decision not to go with you, but to do it for himself. And because he didn't know, because he doesn't know how to make websites, he would have had to learn. So he'd have had to spend his spare time, which would probably be family time in the evenings, watching YouTube videos to learn how to do YouTube. And then he would have had to start building, and then he might have had a few problems. And this could have stretched on, where instead what he did was he decided to pay you to do it. You knocked up the website pretty sharpish. He managed to get to spend some time with his family, or he could have been out there doing extra driving lessons to earn the money to pay for your work. But by having you doing that website, you delivered it quicker than he could. And then he ended up getting a couple of orders, didn't he, within the first week or so of it being
got published. A lead. He got a crash course for like $1,000 within the first week. Within the first week of it going live.
Yeah. So had he done it, he would probably still been putting the website together. So by paying you the 500, which he might not have been able to afford, he probably wasn't, cash. It was probably a decision he had to make.
It pays for itself, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So he ended up making the website quicker while having work and family time with his family, and ended up with another £500 cash in his pocket.
Yeah.
Within the fortnight of the website being launched. So it's often hard to make that decision, which is the best way to go. But sometimes I just want people to sort of think and realize that making a certain decision by playing it safe, we all do, because I've often had to play it safe, but sometimes playing it safe can often be the wrong decision.
Yeah, absolutely. So we should probably share another success story, couldn't we, which happened recently. So we had another client. So the site was built a while ago, maybe even 6 months ago, maybe even a year ago. That was just the base of the site. But then the client got hold of us asking about SEO work. So of which was going to be an ongoing monthly thing. So basically, cut a long story short, we took it on and we done, I think it was 2 months SEO work, wasn't it? So we done 2 months SEO work, of which came in at £800. Now, again, he was a bit, I'll say they were a little bit hesitant, obviously. Don't know, because if you're not in that game, this is a company that have nothing to do with, web design, SEO. So they don't really know what it is you're telling them. They just got to go with it. So we did the 2 months SEO work, and then I got a call from him last week, and he said, I mean, this SEO work had been spanning over, since sort of November time. So it was a good, 3 months ago. Then it was, when we started it all. And I got a call last week saying that they've just landed a client with a job which was worth £45,000. And the client told them, well, they always ask, where did you find out about us? And the client said that they found them ranking on Google. So already the SEO work that we've done has paid off. That £800, which might have been a bit daunting, oh, blimey, can we really sort of push it out to do that? Or do we want to do that? Has paid off, absolutely, 10, 20, however many times over. And again, that's kind of like obviously that's not going to happen every time. And obviously, but that's an example of, when it can work and when it does work, that sort of, again, like you say, they could have maybe hired an intern or something and just said, look, learn SEO for us and let's just try and get our own team to do it. And, we'll span it over like 3 years. Or, you get hire some people that, perhaps know the industry a bit, and then, they've had a successful result off the back of it.
That's it. I mean, that's a fantastic result. I mean, we now live in the best sort of time for gig economies. So like I say, there are people, if you want to learn how to build a website, if you want to learn how to do stuff yourself, then that's fine, because it's very handy having those skills. But if you're working in a day job and you're deciding you want to build a website, or you want to write books, or you want to do something in the evening, you've got very little time, and it takes a lot of time sometimes, not only just to learn these things, but then to get them into practice. You could actually go and make the decision to hire somebody else. And so there's 2 ways of doing that. Like I say, the art of decision making is basically trying to to look at both sides carefully and coming out which is the best decision for you. Lots of people are saying, and I've said this many times, is you can always hire somebody to build your website for you. So you can do that. And if it's you can pay £200, £300, £400, £500 to have somebody build a website for you. It can be done in a few days. You're up and running. Now, if you can't afford to pay £300, £400, £500 to have the website done, and you want to do it yourself, so we're saying, like, maybe don't try and save the money because it can slow things down. Have a look at your situation. If you can't afford to outsource that work to somebody else and you want to do it yourself, then there's the other way of looking at it, and which is kind of like the 80-20 rule. And that is, if you do the website yourself and you master the website yourself, you're going to get great knowledge. You're going to get great, become basically better at that, which is good for your business, which is good for your earnings. If that's the case, if you can't afford somebody else to do it, you do it yourself, then outsource some of the cheaper work to other people. And I've mentioned this before. I wrote a little book about this, which you know about. And that is sometimes people often outsource the higher paid jobs, whereas you could probably actually you could get somebody who's willing to go shopping for you for like 10 and 20 quid. You can get somebody who could do the gardening for you. You can get somebody to do something else. There's a guy who, I don't know if he still does it, but there's a guy in America. He runs several 6 to 7 figure businesses a year. He was a copywriter, and as a copywriter, as you know, you can charge. So, I mean, let's say if you spend a day writing a sales letter, you could charge between 1 to 10 grand. It depends on who it's for, what it's for. So it would make more sense for him to write and spend his time working on his businesses and doing his writing. And then when he had his spare time, he kept that spare time with his family. So to make sure he maximised his time properly, he outsourced the smaller jobs. So he'd have someone come in and cut the grass, do the gardening. He even had, I don't know how you do this in the States, because I don't think you can do it particularly over here, but he would have somebody take his car to the petrol station and fill it. I mean, I don't know where you stand with insurances, but all those small jobs, because they're not highly skilled, he would get people who could just basically pop to Tesco's, do an hour shopping for him, and pay him, 10, 20 quid. So instead of paying, say, £300 to a person to build your website, what you can do if you're struggling for cash is get somebody else to do the smaller jobs, and you focus on that. Because, like I said, decision making is trying to figure out which is the best way to go. Because every decision, there's always there's always basically 2 routes. So you go down that route, you go that route. That route could be expensive but quicker. That route could be save money and long and slow. It's about having to sit down with I suppose, a piece of paper and really sort of thinking it through. Because like I said, I think a lot of people make decisions based on what they've learned over the years and from other people, and they're not always necessarily beneficial. There's a lot of people who try and save money at every turn, and then you look and you just think, well, you could have actually, if you actually stopped and looked at it, you could have actually earned more money by paying somebody to do that, and you'd probably have more spare time. You had a similar story. You was on about having an office built, weren't you? And somebody was
no, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, I was talking about that to someone recently, and because I was thinking about getting like one of those sort of garden offices, and I was speaking to a guy, and he said, "Yeah, just build it yourself." And I was like, I mean, as great as that sounds, do you know what I mean? Don't get me wrong. That sounds brilliant. But for me, it would take me ages. Do you know what I mean? I'd have to get all the materials. I'd have to, do everything like that. I'd have to learn loads of it. And that's not my skill set. And, I can do the basics. Do you know what I mean? Put a few shelves up and put some flat pack furniture together. But, I'm not going to start, building offices out in the garden and cementing and laying it all out level and running armored cable down the path and putting heating in there. I wouldn't do it. And it was like you say, it was either I pay someone to do it, which I realize is I don't know, whatever the expense of that will be. So let's just say, to make it easy, $3,000. Let's say it's $3,000, and I would have to, pay someone to do it. Or my mindset would be, well, what do I have to do to earn $3,000? Well, it could be build 2 websites. That's just an example. Do you know what I mean? I could build 2 websites. I could promote myself a bit more, build 2 websites. We could sell do a hard push on, more courses, or, yourself. I'm not going to say the figures on here, but, I sold a course this year, which 20 times that in sales generation. You've done the same. So, and that was, my way of looking at it. I'd rather apply my skills to stuff that I know, and that I can do, and just do it that way. Another example was, years ago when I was pushing quite a lot on Pinterest, and as much as it's a great channel, as a social media platform, shall I say, it's very, very time consuming, in the sense that you need to be pinning a hell of a lot. And this is at a time when even things like 20 or 30 pins, you think about something like Instagram, right? They recommend maybe doing one a day. Yeah. One new post a day. Pinterest was something like 20 or 30 a day. And it was mental. And I was like, Jesus. So I was hiring a VA to do all the, create all the graphics for me. And then I was going in and manually pinning it all. And it would take an evening every night. It would be like an hour or 2 hours. And I was like, Jesus, this ain't, I'm sort of using a lot of time here, really. And it wasn't really beneficial to me. So I hired a VA on, I think it was people per hour. It was either people per hour or Upwork or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
She was from the Philippines, and she was incredible. And number one, she was a specialist in Pinterest. She knew all the tricks and, loads of things. She's really good at, like, descriptions and hashtags and what time to publish stuff, and all the little sort of tricks of the trade. And also, obviously, it was cost effective to me. Now, this is not knocking the wage. I wasn't, obviously it was a cheap wage, but it was, in our minds, it was a cheap wage. In her mind, in her world, it was a good earner. She was on a good salary. So,
yeah.
And that's, not an uncommon thing in the sort of Western world. You can outsource to, countries where, the pay might only be, a few dollars an hour, and that's perfectly fine. So I would outsource the whole thing to her, and she done it really well, and it grew. It was great. I was going really well, and she grew it really good for like 2-3 months, and it allowed me to have an hour or 2 hours an evening to focus on the stuff which would be more beneficial to me, or us, in that case.
Helped you basically work on stuff that paid.
Yeah.
Because I mean, going back to
pay her fine, and have more left over for myself.
Yeah.
And have more time with the family. Do you know what I mean? And it allowed me to sort of,
going back to the office idea, the bloke who said to you about where you can build it yourself. I mean, I know for well, being a joiner, a carpenter, I've done stuff like that myself. Where with you, as you said, you're going to have to learn. So obviously there'll be time spent trying to watch videos and learn, pick up new skill sets and source material, deal with the deliveries. But you only have a certain amount of time to work on it. So, exactly. Which is basically evenings and weekends. So that means that could become a project which will probably be several months long.
Exactly,
could be quite easily several months long.
You need the weather, you need everything. Yeah.
Yeah, you could have somebody who could come in and do it. You could even probably do it within a weekend, depending on how much you want, but at least a week. Depends on, depending on what the build is.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Exactly. So you could have that build, and then that also, as you said, leaves your evenings and weekends to work on other stuff, which will basically pay for it. So the decision-making process, the idea that sometimes people are so focused on trying to save money is not always the best. It's not the best sort of variant or sort of idea to have in the back of your head. So ideally, if whatever decision you're facing, I think you need to sort of sit down and have a look at it from several angles, trying to work out which is the best way to go. Or is it, yes, if it's going to save you money, that's good, as long as it's not going to lose you money in the long run.
Yeah.
Saving money is fine, as long as it doesn't lose you too much time. Saving, like I say, it's a fine balance, and you don't know necessarily which is the best decision until you make a decision, but on the whole, you can often work out which is probably the better decision by looking at all the different variables. And I think that is something that is often overlooked. Like we said, you can outsource work to people in countries which are emerging countries, so they're quite cheap, but in certain industries, you can look and say, God, how much is that going to cost? I could do that myself. If that's the case, then have a look at outsourcing cheaper work to other people to allow you to do that work. It's just a case of, I think snap decisions are fine, but you need to sort of sit down and really look at it from every angle, because, like I say, if you're not careful, you can get snowed down. I mean, you could have made a decision to build the office yourself in the garden. 2 months, 3 months later, you'll probably be sat there thinking, why the hell did I bother making? Why did I just pay somebody?
Yeah, absolutely. Another little one I want to talk about, Quilly. I don't know if it's relevant, but I think it could be. So you get all these like frugal people, don't you? Like really, really, really frugal, like really, obsessing over, like the sort of yellow sticker bargains in the supermarket, and and I, don't get me wrong, yeah, exactly, like sort of graining the last dregs out of the toothpaste and this, that, and the other. But I see quite a lot of them on Instagram. Now, I'm not knocking them one bit. If that's what they do, then that's what they do, and it is good. Some of the things they preach is very good.
Yeah.
However, there are some, and and I see this all the time. So they go on about frugal lifestyle, right? Which is all about, saving every last penny that you can, almost, shopping in certain shops only because you get the bargains and this, that, and the other. So spending all that extra time to go around to find all these, particular sort of saving days and collecting all your coupons and doing all this, that, and the other, which is fine. But then you also see them, a couple of weeks later, sat in a coffee shop with 2 lattes and a couple of toasties. Now, it kind of, for me, defeats the whole point of it all. Now, I'm not saying don't have any luxuries at all, but again, what is the point of going around saving, 20p a day on your shopping bill because you're going to go and get all these, discount items that are going out of date tomorrow or going out of date today, if you're then going to go and spend 13 quid on a coffee and a toasty? For me, it should be the other way around. If you want to do that, do you know what I mean? Save the 13 quid first. Yeah, that's your 13 quid. Then worry about, the dribs and drabs later on. But I don't know whether that's relevant. Do you know what I mean?
No, it is relevant, because that's, as we were just talking about, where it's working on old sort of ideology, what you've been taught. I suppose it's that kind of look after the pennies and the pounds look after themselves sort of ideology, because they probably, they add up. So, I mean, they'll probably say 20p here, 20p there, and then they'll justify the fact that they can buy the coffee and the toast because they've saved all this money. So it's like a bit of a juggling thing. But as you were just saying then, they do. Sometimes people make a lot of work for themselves. They make it hard for themselves. They go, I suppose people used to camp out for the next sales before they go there at 5 a.m. waiting. So they can go and buy a load of clothes, and then they'll go like, well, I've got all this. And it's like, oh, it's £50 cheaper. And it's like, yeah, but you got up at 5 o'clock to go and do that. If you got up at 7 and went and did some extra work, you could have walked away with £100 in your pocket for doing another job. They make a lot. I mean, again, we're going on people's skill sets and whether they want to or not, or whether they can do. But it's sometimes you get this. You do see people, as you say, they're going around the supermarket. They'll spend ages going around all the different supermarkets to save the penny here and do this there. And yes, they might save a tenner this week and a tenner next week. And yes, over the year it'll add up. But the amount of time that they've done that, they could have done something like, as you and me well know, we are basically we've set up fully automatic passive income systems. Not yesterday, but the day before that, I made a book sale. It was just $2.99. Not huge in the grand scheme of things, but I didn't have to do anything. Once I've done the work, it's done. I get in these dribs and drabs coming through from that one book, and there's other books and bits and bobs we've got online. They're paying for all those savings that people are making. When they're going into these supermarkets, they're wasting that time trying. If you've gone shopping because you're doing the weekly shop and you see some bargains, fine. But people don't, like you say, they bend over backwards to save the penny. And yes, like you say, they go and spend on silly things. They're probably going to cost it on a regular basis. But that's a different decision for them to make. But they could quite easily earn the money that they save by doing less work. So that's another decision idea. It's like, you can save money, you can do this, you can do that, but have a look at the amount of effort and time that's involved, then compare it to something else, and you can look and you can think, well, that's going to take me 10 hours to save 10 quid, but I could do 2 hours work and walk away 20 quid. Which is the better one?
Yeah. I've got a couple more examples. I mean, another one that I like to do, and I do it really to just show people, really. I don't necessarily do it for myself. I put a post out on Instagram last week, a couple of days ago, actually, just saying about 5 pairs of trainers and shoes that I'd sold in the last month. Now, I don't claim to be an eBayer, right? I'm not a full-time reseller, not one bit. But I like to break stuff down. So, for example, if my kids have got, like, I don't know, gym or swimming payments or something like that. So let's say we've just paid 200 quid. I'll often turn around and say, right, I'll make that 200 quid back within the next 3 or 4 days. You know what I mean? Just we either do some extra stuff or, I'll go out. And I did. I went out and I bought like 5 pairs of shoes for 29 quid all in. And they sold for 230 total. So, I mean, take away your fees, that's near enough, I don't know, 100, 180, 190 quid. And all of a sudden, the offset of that extra expense is covered, done, finished. So a lot of people can go on about, oh, we've got to save this, save that. And another mindset hack, which is basically a lot of people say we can't afford something. And when you say we can't afford, that's already like a negative thinking. Can't is a negative word. Rather than say we can't afford, say how can we afford, right? And then all of a sudden your mind goes into like it kicks into action. It needs to think about things. You need to come up with solutions. There's a problem and you need a solution. How can we fix it? How can we afford it? And there's loads of ways of doing it. So, and it depends, and that's just sort of another little mindset, if you like, about decision making, about how you go about stuff. If you break stuff down, we've talked, how many times have we mentioned that? Loads of times, about breaking stuff down into smaller chunks, smaller things, and it's amazing what you can do when you kind of just open it up a little bit and just look at the sort of bigger picture. So I just sort of wanted to add that one, really.
No, I like that one. I mean, it's like you said, it by not saying I can't afford it or we can't afford it, you're basically allowing, you're instructing your mind to start looking for a creative solution. It's starting to go into creative and analytic mode. It's I mean, saying I can't is like quite a defeatist. You might not be able to afford it just yet, but that doesn't mean you can't find a way. Like you said, there's these people who are trying to save pennies here, there, and everywhere, the amount of effort that they put into it, if they've just done what you had done, like you've gone out and bought 5 pairs of trainers for 29 quid, they would have actually probably earned a lot more in that time compared to what they saved, which would have taken probably twice as long. And it's just, that's just what the whole idea of the art of decision making is about, is trying to stop and see what programs are running in your head, where your mind starts with at first. What is stopping you? Why is this? Why is that? Can I do this? Can I do that? Can I do it differently? It's just. I always remember once I had a painter and decorator around. This was quite a few years ago, and I painted. They painted my lounge for me, and it's when I was single, and I paid them. And because I've been working on a building site with this painter, and I said, "Do you want to come around and do my house?" And I remember my mum coming around one day, and she was like, "Well, why don't you do it yourself?" "Oh, Andrew, you just waste all that money." And it's like, no, I actually hate painting. They're painters, they can come and do it. They blast it out a lot quicker than it would take me, reluctantly. And so I was able to carry on doing other stuff. And she was from that generation where it was kind of like, well, anybody can stick a bit of wet paint on a wall with a paintbrush, so you should do it yourself. It's like, well, no, but my time is probably more precious than what I paid them. I think it was probably about 500 quid, 600 quid for the lot. I was able to go and do other stuff. Which I would have done if I was doing all that painting. And they came in did they come in? I'm trying to think if they came in the day and they just really bashed it all out because they were so used to it. And I never regret that decision, but it's that kind of mindset. Some people, they can't see the other side, their decisions are based on what they've been taught, what they've experienced, and it's like a program in their mind. And like I said, sometimes you need to stop and have a look from every angle possible and try and figure out, if I make that decision, is it actually going to be beneficial? Because it can be a false economy. Like I said, with the copper tank, I spent that much time shifting it around the house, and by the time I got it to the scrappy, I got £5, which bought me fish and chips.
Yeah.
I mean, you
Pay
can
for your
go and do
take it out there or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, you can go and do the work and get £20 hanging the door or £30, and then go and get that. So you got a £5 on top. You could, but basically, like I was trying to say, is I didn't go and hang a door, but if I calculated the amount of time, like I said, if I just chucked it in the skip, go on with the house, and then went and spent the morning hanging an extra door, I would have had more money. It's just, sometimes you just have to look at things differently.
Yeah. Another point, sort of a final one, really, I think I wanted to add, final one for me anyway. Again, I quite sort of know the relevance of it, but it's all about complexity and overcomplicating things, this one. This is by no means any kind of financial advice one bit. So don't listen to this and do it. But a lot of people, when they come to investing, now I'm fairly new to investing. And when I say investing, I mean like, stocks and, shares and stuff like that. A lot of people with that can really, really overcomplicate things. You can, and again, I think a lot of people want to buy stuff, shares especially, because it's sort of fashionable. Yeah. So a lot of shares people buy because they like them, or because, they're a brand that they use, or, they don't look at the detail or anything like that. They just buy them because it's, something that they like, or, a car, the model that they drive, or, something like that. So you can have these people that are investing in, stocks and shares and stuff, and they can have a portfolio full of stocks and shares, absolutely full of them. And really, if they look at the nuts and bolts of it, if they were to invest all of it into maybe just one, right, or maybe like the S&P 500 or something, or a share fund which pulls together a lot of them anyway, then they'll probably find that their sort of yearly and average annual returns will be better. Do you know what I mean? So you'll have less of the aggro of swapping around and buying and selling, and what do I do with this one now? Do I keep it? Or what do I do? This one's tanked 30%, and just do away with all that aggro and just stick it in a decent sort of fund, maybe even that pays dividends or something like that, and just forget about it. Literally forget about it. Put your £100 a month in, or whatever you can afford, and just forget about it. And it's exactly this. I see exactly the same with cryptos, and cryptos is probably even worse when it comes to people buying through, emotion, if you like. They buy a coin because they like it. They buy a coin because everyone else has jumped on it. They buy a coin because of, FOMO news, what I mean? Like fear of missing out, whereas if they actually just sat back, looked at the bigger picture, they might kind of realize that, there may only be sort of like a handful that really they're interested in. If they really take a look back, forget about all the FOMO coins, forget about all the hype stuff. And if they just took a step back, and if they were just sensibly investing in, I don't know, say one or two of the top 10, then they'd probably find that their overall gain would have been better than messing around, chopping it around, spreading themselves thin. So I guess the point there I'm trying to make is sometimes it can be easy to kind of overcomplicate stuff, especially when making decisions, when spending money, when buying things, when investing, either that being yourself, either that being your business, either that being hiring freelancers, or, getting stuff done for your company or for your private life. Sometimes overcomplicating stuff, looking at too many options can sometimes be a bit of a hindrance. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, as like we said, people make things hard for themselves. And I think I suppose the conclusion to take from that is a lot of people are afraid to actually make a decision, or to sit down and make a well thought out decision. It's just, like you say, they follow trends, they follow emotion, this, that, and the other, and they work on what they've learned or been told. They don't actually sit down and have a look at every angle and try and figure out which is probably the best solution for them, which is really, like I say, is the art of decision making, trying to figure out which one of the potential results or scenarios is best for you.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so should we wrap up? I think we should probably wrap up.
I think that's everything.
So, closing thoughts then. For me, it was basically what I've just said at the end there, which is all about, don't overcomplicate things. But the main point I want to make to people is that even if you do invest and spend some money on stuff, especially when it comes to the online thing, you might have made a decision, you've gone with it, you've been positive. Even if it doesn't work out, you can still learn something from it. So that would be my kind of closing statement, really.
I think for me is, excuse me, when you're facing a decision, is try and have a look from every angle possible. Just sort of sit down, maybe have a notepad and pen, and think things through. Like I say, we all sort of work on past experience and what we've been taught, and so you might suddenly think, well, if I do this to save money, or if I do that. But you might want to look at a different angle. There's probably an alternative. That means you can still go forward quickly without having to spend thousands or without trying to save thousands. There could be different ways, workarounds, different ways around it. Because otherwise you can end up wasting a lot of time, or you can waste a lot of money by making the wrong decision just because you didn't actually sit down and, look at all the different variables.
Okay. So thanks very much for listening. That was episode 49. So for those of you that have been listening, following along, we do appreciate it. We're a bit of a landmark episode next week, or hopefully we can get on next week. So 50, that's pretty good for us. We started this journey out, seems now a long time ago, really, but that's a good milestone. So anyhow, thanks very much for listening. I've been John Banks. You can find me over at sidingcommand.com, and I've been with
Andy Lehman. You can find me over at freedomskillsacademy.com, and we'll see you in the next podcast next week. Thanks very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.